Hello, and welcome to our messy church for the month of January. A little later than I expected, but here we are. We've just celebrated Christmas, and our last messy church, we welcomed the Christ child. And for this series of messy church, we've been looking at children in the Bible. And I thought, well, let's continue to take a look at Jesus and his childhood. We know a little bit about it, not a whole lot. We know that about 8 days after he was born, his father and mother, Joseph and Mary, took him up to Jerusalem, to the temple, to have a service of dedication, because the firstborn males were always dedicated to the service of God. There they met two prophets, Simeon and Anna, who praised this child. Then they returned back to where they had been. Now, I'm not sure if it was back to Bethlehem or perhaps they went back home to Nazareth. But shortly after that, they had to flee because the king in Jerusalem, Herod, was very jealous and fearful of this newborn king, Jesus. And therefore they had to flee, run away before Herod could hurt him. So they fled to Egypt. And there they stayed for a while until that king, Herod, died, and they felt it was safe to return. In fact, God told them it was safe to return, and they returned to Nazareth. But the next big story we have of Jesus as a young boy is when he was 12 years old, and he and his family made a special trip back to Jerusalem, this time, I think, for the festival of the Passover. And you can read that story in your Bibles. It's in Luke chapter 2. And at verse 41, every year his parents used to go to Jerusalem for the feast of the Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up for the feast as usual. When they were on their way home after the feast, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem without his parents knowing it. They assumed he was with the caravan, and it was only after a day's journey they went to look for him among their relations and friends. When they failed to find him, they went back to Jerusalem, looking for him everywhere. 3 days later, they found him in the temple, sitting among the doctors, listening to them and asking them questions. And all those who heard him were astounded at his intelligence and his replies. They were overcome when they saw him, and his mother said to him, "My child, why have you done this to us? See how worried your father and I have been, looking for you." "Why were you looking for me?" he replied. "Did you not know that I must be busy with my father's affairs?" But they did not understand what he meant. He went down with them and came to Nazareth and lived under their authority. His mother stored up all these things in her heart, and Jesus increased in wisdom, in stature, and in favor with God and people. Jesus is growing up. He's becoming a young man. Do you remember what it's like growing up? Because it should be easy. You're right in the middle of it, or at least at the beginning of it. Things are changing. In fact, I've got some old photos here. Maybe you recognize this fellow. Well, that's me. I'm about 2 years old when my family lived in Oakville. And then a few years later, get a little closer, you can see me better. There's a Christmas morning, I think about 1965. And one of my early school pictures. Yeah, sometimes as we get older, we don't necessarily get better looking. How's that one? And you get friends, Maybe you get involved in scouts. I think that's me right there, sort of in the middle. You see, and then I got a little older, got a job. It was cowboy days at Food City. You go to school and you graduate. That's me, and graduating from Queen's University, 1984, long before you were born, and I dare say probably before your parents were born. Not all of you. Yeah, probably all of you. So there you go. When you grow up, things change. But what do you need to grow up? Strong and healthy. Well, eat good food, you exercise, you develop good habits like brushing your teeth, keeping clean. Certainly these days, we wash our hands, we cover our mouths when we cough, all those good habits. We grow in our minds. We listen to our parents and we listen to our teachers, and we go to school, we read books, and so we grow in body and in mind. But what is it to grow in faith? What is it to gain stature and wisdom in the eyes of God? Well, we can do just what Jesus did. He read his Bible, the Old Testament. He knew it quite well. In fact, he knew it very, very well. That's why those teachers of the law, the doctors of the law in the temple, were so amazed by his questions and his answers. He prayed. We know that. He probably went to school for his faith, just like you're doing right now by coming to Messy Church. And you did in the past, and hopefully will soon do again in the future, attend Sunday school. And he belonged to his faith community. He belonged to a synagogue. And he would go there on the Sabbath, just as you at one time were able to come to church and take part in the life and the liturgies, the services. You got a chance to be around older, more mature Christians and learn from them. It was a good habit to develop as well. And hopefully in a few weeks, if not months, we'll be able to do so again as this pandemic, God willing, begins to wind down. So Jesus grew up, and you're growing up. And we want to grow up just like him. So that's how you do it. Read your Bibles, keep at your prayers, learn from your parents and your elders, from other Christians, and be a part of the faith community here at St. Thomas's, or wherever you may end up being as you continue to grow up and get older. Now, for the game, well, this game is really kind of easy. It's Jesus was lost, at least that's what his parents thought. He knew where he was and what he was doing. So you might want to play some form of hide and seek, either with yourselves or perhaps you can take an object. Maybe get the big people in your house to hide a small object that you have to find. And maybe the small people in your house can find a big object that you have to hide. And the big people have to find. Or vice versa. Whatever. Just have some fun. And on these cold, damp, gray days, it's a lot easier sometimes to play inside. And I'm sure there are all sorts of nooks and crannies, places in your house where you could hide or you could hide something, making it hard for people to find you or whatever it is you've hidden. For the craft, we've provided everyone with a grow chart. Do you have a special place maybe in your house? We have one in my house. It's a door frame between the kitchen and the dining room. And on the wall, we have marked various points in pencil, how tall people were, Our sons Matthew and Daniel, and now our granddaughter Melody, all have little marks there, and my mark is there. I'm probably the tallest one at this point, or I was at one time. But some people do that on a board because I can't take that door frame with me whenever I move out of that house. Some people put it on a board they can keep and take with them wherever they go, or they make one, and that's what we have here. Is we have a paper one that you can color in the words, then you cut it out and you glue it together, glue them together, or use tape. Doesn't really matter. And if you look over my shoulder, you'll see that there's one there right now. This is the one I made earlier. Easier if I bring it to you. It's all colored in, and you can use these little squares to measure or to write in the date. I was this tall at this date, this month, this year. So what you could do is once you've got it started, maybe use the bottom part, that's the top of your head. Mark in the date 01/22, January 2022. That's where we're starting. And over the next few months, maybe a year or so, probably not that long because you're growing pretty fast, you can mark how much taller you're getting, how you're growing up. Now at my age, I'll start up here because we tend to start shrinking, at least in height, not necessarily in width. So there you go, Messy Church for January. You can read again about some of the childhood stories of Jesus in Matthew's Gospel in the 2nd chapter and in Luke's Gospel in the 2nd chapter. They're both different. They both tell different stories about Jesus as a young boy. But just remember, he grew up and he grew up well. You're growing up. And I know you're growing up as well too. But to help you along, remember the things we talked about. Good habits to develop for your body and your mind, but also have some good habits for your spirit, for your heart. So take care of yourselves. I hope to see you around real soon. Stay safe and stay well, and God bless.